Established on July 6, 1851, Fort Mason was one of many forts along the western frontier to protect the settlers from Indian attacks. All that is left today is a reconstruction of an officer's quarters. Brevet Colonel W.G. Freeman inspected the fort in 1853, saying, "The site is elevated, commanding an extensive view of the surrounding country. An unfailing supply of pure spring water is found within 400 yards. Mail matter is brought up weekly from San Antonio by special express. The buildings were constructed entirely by the command and are substantial and comfortable. Many of the officers here would go on to serve in the Civil War. 20 of them became generals. 12 fought for the Confederacy, 8 for the Union. The most well-known person who served here is Robert E. Lee. It was here he decided to not take up arms against his home state of Virginia and would join the Confederacy even though he was against the war. John Bell Hood is another well-known figure who served here. He would later go on to command Hood's Texas Brigade. Others who served here are General Earl Van Dorn, Albert Sidney Johnston, General George H. Thomas, General Joseph B. Plummer, General William B. Hazen, Brigadier General Henry H. Sibley, William J. Hardy, William S. Harney, Lieutenant General Edmund Kirby Smith, and many more. Alright, let's start the tour here. We're standing in the hallway, or dog run. You can see there's 2 rooms on each side, and we'll take a look at each of them right now. So as we go into these rooms, I just want to point out that you can't actually walk inside the room. There's plexiglass, but it gives you an idea of what the rooms might have looked like, although they're not entirely accurate. An officer and his family would have stayed in each one of these rooms. So it would have been a sleeping, dining, office, all combined into this one room. Can you imagine sharing this small room, 15 feet by 15 feet, with an entire family? This is the original tiny living. And as you can see, this room is set up kind of like an office. There's a mannequin in the corner of an officer doing his work at a desk. And as we go into this next room, it's set up like a bedroom. You can see the bed in the corner. And I want to point out too, this is kind of cool. I love this bathtub here. It's pretty cool. All right, let's go to the next room. This room is set up kind of like a dining room, living room area. There's a couch by the fireplace, a trunk here in the corner, and a dining table. And there's another mannequin in the corner of a woman. All right, let's go to my favorite room. This is my favorite room because you can actually walk inside of it, and there's a lot of great artifacts in here. We'll get to those in just a moment. First, I want to point out, though, this is a diagram of what the fort would have looked like. In the foreground is the officers' quarters, and in the background is the soldiers' barracks, and of course all the other buildings like that would have been here. Pretty neat. There's a map up there of what the fort would have looked like. And then on the wall are some plaques. I just want to point a couple of them out for you. It may be hard to read. In 1851, Major Merrill was directed to establish Fort Mason on or near Comanche Spring on the Llano. The quarters and shelters are to be of a temporary nature and will be erected in the most economical manner. No mechanics will be allowed. The eligible labor will be performed by the troops. The Army did not provide an overall plan or detailed plans for individual building. And another one I like to point out is from Miss Albert Sidney Johnston. In her diary, she complained about the crowded room, saying they had 3 children of their own, and the officer next door had 6 squalling children. I can imagine it was probably pretty noisy with all those kids running around. And over here is a picture of a poster, I should say, of all the officers who served here throughout their time, later on became generals. The bottom is the Union, and on top is the Confederacy. So you can see most of them went to the Confederacy, but not all of them. Some went for the Union. And over here, this is my favorite part. You can see all the artifacts that they dug up on this site. Pretty neat. Some horseshoes up there. Some nails, locks, some glass fragments, gun, and there's a painting over here that might be hard to tell. It's a painting of the site. You can see them riding out of Fort Mason. And then there's a map next to it of all the roads that came through this area at that time. And over here, this is the man responsible for a lot of the archaeology that was done here. He discovered this site. At first, there was nothing on this site, and it was just an empty field. This man discovered the foundations of the original officers' quarter, which was later reconstructed in the 1970s on the original foundations. That's the one we're touring right now. And he discovered a lot of artifacts and was a leader in doing some archaeology here. And if you come over here, there's some more plaques you can read. These two I want to point out. Might be kind of hard to read, but I do want to read some of it. I think it's really interesting. The most colorful and flamboyant officer to command Fort Mason, Colonel Charles May stood 6 feet 4 inches tall. His hair hung down to his hip bone and his beard extended to his chest. Before coming to Fort Mason, he had several brushes with the law. One of his favorite pastimes was riding his horse through local hotels and terrorizing the guests. Another was steeplechasing through the streets of Baltimore. When a War Department order in 1848 forbade the wearing of long hair and whiskers, he complained long and loud, but to no avail. Without his long hair, the colonel lost some of his bravado, devilry, and spunk, but not all. He once announced to some visiting Indians that he was a medicine man and could restore life to the dead. When no braves volunteered to join his demonstration, he asked to use their dog. He took the dog inside the tent and killed it with chloroform. He then returned from the tent with the lifeless body of the dog. He cut off small pieces and gave one to each chief. He then carried the dead dog back to the tent. In a few minutes, the giant medicine man emerged, followed by a barking and jumping dog with no tail. Thought that was kind of interesting. What a very interesting character. And over here, you can see this one is dedicated to Robert E. Lee. This is a letter that he wrote to his son, Curtis, on January 23rd, 1861. I just want to read it. It really kind of gives you an insight on Robert E. Lee and why he chose to fight for the Confederacy. It says, "The South, in my opinion, has been aggrieved by the acts of the North, as you say. I feel the aggression and am willing to take every proper step for redress. It is the principle I contend for, not individual or private benefit. As an American citizen, I take great pride in my country, her prosperity and institutions, and would defend any state if her rights were invaded. But I can anticipate no greater calamity for the country than the dissolution of the Union." Let me repeat that. I can anticipate no greater calamity for the country than a dissolution of the Union. It would be an acclamation of all the evils we complain of, and I am willing to sacrifice everything but honor for its preservation. I hope, therefore, that all constitutional means will be exhausted before there is a resort to force. Secession is nothing but revolution. The framers of our Constitution never exhausted so much labor, wisdom, and forbearance in its formation, and surrounded it with so many guards and securities, if it was intended to be broken by every member of the Confederacy at will. It was intended for perpetual union, so expressed in the preamble, and for the establishment of a government, not a compact, which can only be dissolved by revolution, or the consent of all the people in convention assembled. It is idle to talk of secession. Anarchy would have been established, and not a government by Washington, Hamilton, Jefferson, Madison, and the other patriots of the Revolution. Still, a union that can only be maintained by swords and bayonets, and in which strife and civil war are to take the place of brotherly love and kindness, has no charm for me. I shall mourn for my country and for the welfare and progress of mankind. If the union is dissolved and the government disrupted, I shall return to my native state and share the miseries of my people. and save in defense, will draw my sword on none. So you can see how Robert E. Lee felt about, he was not for the war, but he chose to take up arms to defend his home state of Virginia, and ended up fighting for the Confederacy. And if you go over here, there's some more plaques that you can read. I like this one here of General George H. Thomas. You may have never heard of him. I certainly didn't. It says, Thomas elected to remain with the Union and was considered one of the greatest generals of his time. Although his name is almost forgotten today, his decision caused him great personal suffering. His family disowned him and burned all of his letters and personal items. His sisters, in great need, refused his help, saying that they had no brother. So as you can see, it truly was brother against brother during the Civil War. There's a picture of him. And over here, down on the floor, you can see there's a map of the building. Map of the, you can see the soldiers' quarters in the back there. And that red dot, that's where we are, the officers' quarters. This is the exact spot we would have been standing in if we had been here in the 1850s. And as you look up, just my exposure, you can see what it would look like standing out this window in this very spot. Let's go outside. This is my favorite part. As you come out here, you can see just why they chose this spot. The extensive view is truly incredible. You can see for miles out onto the horizon from this very spot. Well, that's all for this episode. See you guys next time.